Willa of the Wood, Chapter 3. Willa looked at the killing stick with dread. She'd never seen one this close. She didn't know how they worked, but she'd watched enough hunters in the woods to know their wicked power. She'd seen deer struck dead from a distance, hawks killed in midair. During the previous winter, she'd found a wounded wolf lying on the forest floor and bandaged her wounds with healing leaves so that she could get back to her starving pups. The man lay with his eyes closed in the bed. His hands moved restlessly beside his body, touching the killing stick and the exhausted dog as he muttered in his troubled sleep. Willa knew she should go, but she also knew that some of the most valuable things in the lair would be in this very room. Into the room she crept, nothing but a shift of darkness moving through the shadows. Slipping over to the dresser, she quickly snatched half of the necklaces and earrings she found in the jewelry box, liking the weight of her satchel more and more. The little ones in her clan who didn't steal, and steal well, didn't get fed. It was the way the Padaran had run the clan since before she was born. If you didn't return to the lair with your satchel full, you didn't get dinner. And if it happened 2 nights in a row, you'd get worse than that. The Padaran had told her many times that the Dayfolk were rich and didn't need their money or their belongings. And when she looked at everything the Dayfolk had, she thought it must be true. But she also thought maybe it was better to take only half of what she found and leave the rest behind, just in case the Dayfolk and their children were hungry too. She had stolen from many of the homesteads along this river. Stealing only half of what she found made her taking less noticeable. Move without a sound. Steal without a trace. That was what she taught herself. If the Dayfolk were truly rich, then they wouldn't notice a few things missing come morning. Of course, she could never tell the Padaran about her rule of halves. He'd thrash her until the stream that ran beneath their lair turned red. But she was very good at stealing, and he was usually well pleased with her take. She knew she was one of his favorites, and she was determined to keep it that way. Her grandmother, her mama, whom she loved with all her heart, had told her that there had once been a time when the Farron had lived in the forest desiring nothing but what the forest could provide them. But when the homesteaders came cutting with their axes and building their candle-lit homes in the woods, the Farron began to change. Their words, their wants, their ways. Sometimes when Willa was way out in the forest alone, apart from the rest of the clan, she felt the power of the forest and its creatures deep inside her, as she knew that her mama was telling the truth. There had been a time before. The man jerked in his sleep, snoring loudly, and took a sudden, gasping breath. Willa leapt back in surprise, her limbs flooded with cold fear. But then the man mumbled something in the darkness as if he was fighting something in his dreams. The dog adjusted its position, and the two of them fell back to sleep. When Willa started breathing again, she shook her head in mocking disbelief. That dog was worthless. It couldn't smell a thing. She was right here next to them, and it didn't even know. Feeling more confident than ever, she searched the top of the dresser for more valuables. She noticed a closed black book with a long red tassel hanging down from the pages. The book had a short single-word title that she couldn't read. Sitting on the book, there was a gold ring. She picked up the ring and held it up in the moonlight that shone through the window. It was one of the most beautiful Dayfolk things she had ever seen. What is this gleaming thing for? She wondered. What is its magic? Noticing a glint of light out of the corner of her eye, she looked over toward the bed. The sleeping man wore an identical gold ring on the 3rd finger of his left hand. She knew she should take the gold ring from the dresser and run as fast as she could. Take it and leave, she told herself. It had to be the most valuable thing in this lair, and it would definitely be the most valuable thing she ever brought back in her satchel. She could imagine the Padaran's snarling grin as she set the shining gold ring in his awaiting hands. This is a good take, girl, he'd rasp in pleasure, all the other jetters ducking and sniveling around him, their jealousy writhing through them like poison as they snapped and hissed at her. But as she held the golden ring in her hand, a sickening feeling crept through her. She tried to convince herself that taking one of the rings wasn't breaking her rule of halves. But there was something in her that felt strangely uncertain. Sometimes 2 things weren't just 2 things. They were a pair. And a pair was a thing. Half wasn't always half, she thought. Sometimes half was a whole. She didn't know what the rings were for or what they meant, but it seemed wrong to take one, to separate it from the other, like tearing a wing from a swallowtail butterfly and telling herself it could still fly. Before she could change her mind, she reluctantly set the ring back on top of the book where she'd found it and crept out of the room of the snoring man and his dim-nosed, deaf dog. She moved quickly toward the next room, determined to stay focused. The next room was draped with dresses. Her heart quickened in the sight that she was going to see a dayfolk girl up close. The girl's scent hung in the air, but there was no little girl sleeping in the room's bed. The fact that it was the middle of the night and the girl was gone seemed very strange. But Willa went over to the girl's dresser and took a shiny bracelet, a silver hairpin, several velvet ribbons, a tiny porcelain doll, and a locket. As Willa darted down to the next room, it smelled immediately of boy. She knew it was a dayfolk boy, but it was a boy all the same. On a breezy day, she could smell boys from across the meadow, whether they were dayfolk or night. But the boy's bed was empty as well, the covers twisted on the floor. Willa's brows furrowed. Where did the boy go? And where is the little sister girl who should have been in the previous room? And why is the man sleeping with his killing stick on his bed? Get what you came for, she told herself, shaking her head and continuing on. They were the words she used whenever she became ensnared in the bewildering details of the dayfolks' lives. Get what you came for and go, Willa! She hurriedly searched the boy's room for valuables. The first thing she found looked like a large leather glove made for a giant hand. The boy's hand must be grotesquely deformed and misshapen, she thought. Beside the glove lay a white ball and a stout wooden walking stick of some sort. The boy's legs must be crooked as well. She felt a little sorry for the poor crippled creature, but she stuffed half of his coin collection and half of his Cherokee arrowheads into her satchel and dashed down the hall toward the fourth and final room. Get what you came for. But then her ear twitched and the quills on the back of her neck stood on end. The snoring had stopped. The man had awoken. She heard the muffled sound of movement, covers being pulled back. She felt the vibration as his feet hit the floor. Get on up, boy, the man whispered urgently to his dog. They're back. Willa exploded into motion. She sprinted down the length of the hallway, racing for the top of the stairs. The man charged out of his bedroom with his killing stick. Willa flashed by him, nothing but a dark streak. The man charged. He must have been startled by her as she was by him, because he lurched back in surprise. She dove headlong down the darkened stairway, her feet barely touching the steps. But the startled man raised his weapon and aimed blindly into the darkness. A flash lit the air on fire, and the sound of it shook the world. The blast struck her in the back. The force of it knocked her careening forward. She slammed into the wall at the turn of the stairway and tumbled down the rest of the stairs like a raccoon shot from a tree. The lead shot ripped through her tunic and riddled her shoulder blade and arm. White-hot lightning pierced through her body as she crashed onto the floor at the bottom of the stairway. The enraged man and his growling dog were charging down the stairs to finish her off. Get up, she told herself, trying to find her way through the pain. Get up, Willa. You've got to run.